Nvidia released its third quarterly earnings this year, which massively beat expectations. They are up more than 1,100% in 3 years. Surely this proves that AI is not in a bubble, right? Wrong. OpenAI lost $5 billion in 2024. They are projecting to lose $9 billion in 2025. Surely this proves that AI is in a bubble, right? Wrong. Sam Altman says that they're even losing money on the $200 per month subscription because too many people are using it. Surely that's a bubble, right? Well, that one is a bit more complicated. Here's the thing that most people get wrong about the AI market. Nvidia making money doesn't prove anything. OpenAI losing money doesn't prove that AI is just hype. And an AI bubble, even if it happens, it won't be as impactful as you think. In this video, I'll break down the entire AI industry from first principles. We'll talk about where every dollar goes, who's winning and who's losing, whether there's an upcoming crash, and many more. By the end, you'll understand more about the AI industry than the people working in it. So, let's get into it. The foundation of the AI industry starts with Nvidia. In 1993, 3 engineers were sitting at a diner in San Jose. They bet that the future of computers isn't faster CPUs, it's graphics, 3D graphics. And one of those 3 people were Jensen Huang. At the start, this was a joke, because PCs were for spreadsheets, not video games. But Jensen was impressed by 2D games like Doom, he clearly had a good taste, and he saw big potential. Fast forward to 1995, Nvidia drops its first 3D graphics chip, the NV1, which was a disaster. And they almost went bankrupt, but they pivoted hard and created Riva 128 in 1997, which was the fastest 3D graphics card on the planet. However, 1999 was the real breakthrough, the GeForce 256. And at that point, Nvidia invents the term GPU. And they spark an entire gaming PC revolution. They went public that year and won the graphics contract for Microsoft's first Xbox. So in the 2000s, Nvidia basically owned high-end gaming. Now, at the core of a GPU, there are thousands of mathematical operations running in parallel. This is very valuable in gaming to calculate things like pixel colors and vertex positions, but Jensen was always thinking bigger. He looked at his graphics cards, which were used to draw triangles at Call of Duty, and said, what if we could use the same parallel processing power for other applications? So in 2006, they quietly launched CUDA, a way to program their GPUs for things beyond graphics. So CUDA was a translation layer. It allowed programmers to program the GPU and take advantage of its parallel processing capabilities in multiple domains like protein folding, oil exploration, etc. It allowed developers to essentially write standard C or C++ and later Python code that would run directly on the GPU instead of the CPU. 2012 was the year when everything changed for Nvidia. Unexpectedly, I would say. A breakthrough AI image recognition model called AlexNet was created at a lab in University of Toronto, and apparently, the researchers used Nvidia's GPUs to train their AI model using CUDA. So they were able to use CUDA to take advantage of the GPU's parallel processing power and realized that the chip that makes great video games can also calculate the probabilities of a neural network efficiently. From that moment, every serious AI lab began buying Nvidia hardware. Nvidia was releasing a new AI GPU architecture every 2 years, A100, H100, H200, and the most recent one, Blackwell, all designed from the ground up for large-scale AI training and inference. In November 2022, OpenAI releases ChatGPT. Suddenly, everyone wants generative AI, and Nvidia becomes even bigger. Hyperscalers like Microsoft, Amazon, Meta are buying a bunch of H100s, and major deals start pouring in. Nvidia becomes the world's largest company by market cap. But here's the thing that we're going to unpack next. When Nvidia posts another blowout quarter like they did recently, does that really prove that AI is not in a bubble and is delivering ROI? Now that we know about Nvidia, let's find out who are Nvidia's top customers. For clarity, this is not an analysis on Nvidia, but on the AI industry as a whole. Nvidia is just the foundation of that. Number 1, you have Microsoft, which spent about $40 billion in Nvidia GPUs in 2025. Then you've got Meta at number 2, spending about $25 billion on GPUs as they are laser focused on Llama models for ads. Then you've got Google spending about $22 billion. They use their own TPUs for Gemini, but they still buy some for their cloud customers and for Anthropic. I'll talk more about that later. Then you've got Amazon spending about 18 billion, but surging, especially with the recent OpenAI deal. And then you've got companies like XAI as an example, which is estimated at about 4 billion. Now you might say, what about frontier labs like OpenAI and Anthropic? Well, they are not direct buyers. Most of their purchases flow through these hyperscalers like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon via cloud commitments. OpenAI, for example, had a long-term partnership with Microsoft, and recently Amazon chipping in with 38 billion investment. Also, Anthropic recently had a 30 billion Azure deal with Microsoft. So what that means is that Anthropic committed to spend 30 billion on Microsoft Azure cloud services, basically using or renting out all of the GPUs that Microsoft buys from Nvidia. So Microsoft buys the GPUs, Anthropic pays Microsoft to use them, and Microsoft takes the margin. These frontier labs are also starting to buy direct, but the majority of their purchases come through these hyperscalers. So why am I saying this? Let's map out the cycle. Nvidia builds the GPUs, these hyperscalers buy the GPUs, and they rent them out for two main things. Number one is training. So the frontier labs use the GPUs from the hyperscalers to train their models. Hyperscalers also train their own models, Google Gemini being the most significant one, but there are others as well. Number two is inference. So consumers like us pay for ChatGPT Plus, Claude Code, and others. For example, ChatGPT, under the hood, leverages primarily Azure and most recently AWS. And outside of consumers, you have enterprise customers like banks and retailers, or companies like Cursor and Replit consuming these models via APIs. That is what we call inference, actually running the model after training. Right now, the training side is a cash machine, for hyperscalers specifically, and of course, Nvidia. These frontier labs are making cloud commitments left and right. Even Oracle recently joined in. However, the frontier labs themselves, like OpenAI and Anthropic, are losing money. More on that soon. But they are able to survive on investor money to pay for these cloud bills, which are paying for Nvidia's GPUs. The inference part, that's where things get interesting. This is the part that's supposed to pay for everything long term. This is the millions of companies calling these APIs to build real AI use cases, and people like you paying for things like ChatGPT, Claude Code, Lovable, etc. But the unit economics of that don't work. Putting R&D costs aside, like training the model, and focusing on gross margins, we can say with confidence from several leaks that the inference business is running at a negative gross margin overall. Now, not every API call loses money, so a short question or query on a model is probably profitable. But a complex task with a long context window will cost far more in compute than what the customer pays. Anthropic's own internal slides were leaked in November 2025, showing their gross margin on inference is negative 94% before you even count R&D costs like training the models. That means for every $1 Anthropic earns from inference, they spend roughly $1.94 just on compute, before salaries, before rent, before training the next model. Sam Altman said the same thing about ChatGPT Pro, the $200 month subscription. He said they're losing money because people use it more than expected. Heavy users on unlimited plans simply cost more in compute than what they pay. Bottom line, the cost per token is still too high relative to what customers are willing to pay. Now, this is on the consumer side. On the enterprise side, a lot of enterprise AI use cases are failing or never make it to production. Remember, hyperscalers invest in GPUs to host these frontier models as inference for enterprises to build real business use cases on top of. But we don't know much about how profitable that business is. So inference for enterprise AI use cases. But what we do know is that none of the hyperscalers disclose how profitable that business is. They vaguely say AI revenue grew by X%. But AI is a broad term. It could mean inference revenue. It could mean cloud commitments from frontier labs. It could mean training workloads. And they just bundle it all together. And I suspect that's intentional. So in summary, a real simplified view of the industry: Nvidia builds the GPUs, hyperscalers buy the GPUs, frontier labs train their models using those GPUs. Now who's paying for the training? It's investor money. It's not the profits from inference. In an ideal world, inference would be profitable such that it pays for training costs. So yes, Nvidia is making a lot of money today. Hyperscalers are making money, at least Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, on the training side of things. We don't know much about the inference, but we can take an educated guess that they are losing on that. But it doesn't matter. They are still earning lots of money from cloud commitments. But the frontier labs are losing billions on training and inference. Now that you understand the relationship between all of the players and where the money flows, you could say if the inference side never grows up fast enough to replace the training burn, eventually investors will stop writing checks, the labs will slow down, and the whole thing collapses. However, here's why I don't think this massive overspending will end anytime soon. And that is because no one wants to risk losing the AI race. Anthropic don't want to risk it, OpenAI don't want to risk it, Microsoft don't want to risk it, xAI don't want to risk it, their own investors don't want to risk it. They are all betting on the future of technology. Anyone who wins the AI race will benefit tremendously. This is classical game theory, meaning even if everyone would be better off slowing down, no individual player can afford to do that, because whoever keeps going might just win everything. It's a classical prisoner's dilemma case. Rational actors, irrational collective outcome. So yes, even though AI is not profitable, no one is willing to risk falling behind, including the investors in these companies. Sunk cost fallacy is also at play here. Investors have already invested too much, and we know that the deeper you're in, the harder it is to walk away. The other thing that is important to mention is the best sales tool in history: fear-mongering. For example, Anthropic CEO in March 2025 said, in 12 months, we may be in a world where AI is writing all of the code. Now, we're 3 months away from that. We know how that is going. But more recently, in September 2025, he said AI could eliminate half of all entry-level white-collar jobs within the next 1 to 5 years, causing unemployment to rise as high as 20%. Elon Musk in 2024, for example, has said, probably none of us will have a job in the near future, amongst many other comments as well. And there are so many others. Now, people listen to that and say, wow, these are the smartest people in the industry. They must be right. But what people don't know is that CEOs of these companies are the last people you should listen to for any insights on the industry, because they have one job, and really one job: create more and more hype and fear-mongering so they can raise more money or raise their stock prices. Some investors are sophisticated and they won't fall for it, but they're not all as sophisticated as you think. Also, the CEOs buying AI are under pressure too. I'm talking about the banks, the retailers, the insurance companies, what we call enterprise customers. Their boards and investors are asking, what's our AI strategy? And these CEOs don't want to be the one who missed the revolution. So they sign big AI contracts. Not because they've done their due diligence or rigorous ROI analysis, but because they need to show that they're doing something with AI. I've seen this firsthand many times. So you have AI company CEOs hyping things up to raise money, and enterprise CEOs excessively spending to satisfy their boards. The hype feeds the spending validates the hype. It's a self-reinforcing cycle, and none of it proves AI is actually delivering returns yet. Okay, so we covered a lot so far. We know where the money flows. Nvidia makes the GPUs, hyperscalers buy them, they rent them through frontier labs. We know that inference is not profitable enough to cover the massive training costs, and that is due to costs of tokens being high relative to how much customers are spending and the lack of AI adoption in enterprises. We know that massive overspending will probably continue. So the big question is, what does the future look like? That massive overspending should probably stop at one point. And you won't be wrong. But there are two things to take into consideration that not many people talk about. Number one is cost per tokens are going down. Many people, including myself, sometimes forget that. Models are becoming better and cheaper. The cost per token is decreasing while the quality of the responses are increasing. For example, GPT-3 was about $0.02 per 1,000 tokens, while GPT-4o, a much stronger model, was roughly $0.0025 to $0.01 per 1,000 tokens. Now, advancements in model architectures like mixture of experts make this possible, because instead of activating all parameters for every token, you only activate a small subset. This matters because inference is the part that's supposed to pay for everything. Right now, companies like Anthropic are running at a loss on every API call. But if inference becomes profitable, and profitable enough to pay for model training costs, that changes the whole equation. And that will happen at some point in the future. Remember, historically, technology has always become better and cheaper. Computers, storage, bandwidth, you can think of many different examples. The GPUs themselves are becoming more efficient. Nvidia's H100 is roughly 3 times more efficient than the A100. Blackwell is also another jump. Nvidia's entire product line is shifting towards inference because that's where the volume is. Training happens once, inference happens billions of times. So every efficiency improvement in inference hardware compounds across every API call, every ChatGPT query, every enterprise deployment. Also, electricity is getting cheaper. Microsoft signed a deal to restart 3 Mile Island for nuclear power. Amazon invested in nuclear through Talon Energy, and Google is betting on small modular reactors. This is a long-term play, but if it works, it fundamentally changes the math. Nuclear provides consistent baseload power at much lower costs than natural gas and much more sustainable than renewable energy. And when that happens, data centers running AI inference 24/7 would see their operating costs drop significantly until we reach the point where inference revenue doesn't just cover compute costs, but also pays for everything: training, salaries, operations. That's when these companies become real businesses. And I think that will happen sooner than we expect. Number 2 is the adoption versus technology. Now, what I mean by that is, even if AI is ready today, the businesses or enterprises aren't ready for it. Adopting a disruptive technology isn't just buying a subscription and plugging it in. It requires change management, redesigning workflows, retraining employees, rethinking entire business processes. That takes time, years sometimes. Think about cloud computing. AWS was launched in 2006. The technology was ready, but most enterprises didn't seriously migrate until maybe the mid-2010s, nearly a decade later. Not because the tech wasn't good enough, but because moving critical systems to the cloud meant changing how entire organizations operated. A bank can't just plug ChatGPT into their customer service overnight. They need compliance reviews, security audits, integration with legacy systems. They need good data. They need employee trainings, new processes for when AI gets wrong. That's not a weekend project. That's a multi-year transformation, and it will take time. So is AI in a bubble? The answer is yes. But to be honest with you, I don't think it matters. Let's explain what a bubble actually is from first principles. A bubble happens when money floods into something based on potential rather than actual performance. So companies are valued not on what they earn, but on what they might earn someday. This is how the stock market works. It's always forward-looking. And when that happens at scale, that can cause a bubble. Now, does that sound familiar after watching this video? Some investors are thinking about this the right way, but for others, they're not. In many cases, if you put AI on your company, you can raise money. Startups with no revenue are raising billions because they're building a quote-unquote AI-powered product. Enterprise companies are signing up for AI tools they don't need just because they're bored asked about their AI strategy. History is the greatest predictor of the future. This is exactly what happened in 1999. In the late 90s, the internet was real. The potential was real, similar to what AI is in right now. And it was in a serious bubble. If you had .com in your name, you could raise millions. Pets.com raised 82 million and went bankrupt in just 268 days in total. Hundreds of companies existed purely because the word internet was in the pitch deck. Then it all crashed, and people declared that the internet was a failed experiment. But they were wrong. Amazon survived. It was down 90% from its peak. 90%, but it survived. Why? Because people were actually buying books from them. Real customers, real transactions, real value. Google launched after the crash, in the middle of the nuclear winter, and became one of the most valuable companies in history. Why? Because search was genuinely useful. People needed it. Now, let's be honest about AI. ChatGPT is not fake. Let's not kid ourselves. 200 million people use it. Millions pay $20 a month for the premium version, not because it's trendy, but because it genuinely helps them. GitHub Copilot has over 1.8 million paying subscribers, and developers aren't paying $20 a month for nothing. They're paying because it makes them more productive. Now, with that said, ChatGPT being a great product doesn't mean OpenAI should be valued at $300 billion while losing tons of money on every API call. And I'm not an investor to be judging that, but that is not the fault of the technology. It is the people investing in the technology. Are there a lot of useless products out there? Absolutely. And that's why a market correction or a crash, call it whatever you want, will be a good thing. Similar to what happened in the dot-com bubble, where it filtered out a lot of useless companies, the same filter is coming for AI. The companies with real products, real users, and a path to real margins will survive. And I think a lot of these companies are betting on inference costs going down, and it's a wise bet. So let's come back to where we started. Nvidia beats expectations. People say, see, AI is not in a bubble. They're wrong. Nvidia's revenues prove that companies are spending on AI, but it proves nothing about whether AI is delivering real returns. Nvidia gets paid whether the end product works or not. OpenAI is losing money, Anthropic is losing money, and people say, see, AI is just all hype. They're also wrong. Amazon lost money for years. Netflix kept burning cash. And the same story for Uber. The AI products are real. 200 million people use ChatGPT on a weekly basis. Developers are genuinely more productive with AI. The value is real. The valuations are the problem. The internet wasn't a bubble. Pets.com was a bubble. The technology was real. The valuations were fake. AI is the same story. The technology is real. A lot of the valuations are fake. And when the correction comes, it won't kill AI. It will just kill companies that were never real to begin with.